but we're going to get back on track here because I know people are really want to know who is the name. And I think it's fairly obvious who this name is going to be, but we had some. Oh, I understand. The 916 is saying Keon Ellis was starting. So Ellis out and Malik Monk in. Wow. Okay, I understand that now, 916. They did not count Ellis as a starter because ... Chris Watkins.
Because Bleacher Report says that the Kings should move one Kevin Huerter to the bench. This is again from Bleacher Report today, saying the substitution to make is Huerter to the bench for Keon Ellis, with the new Kings starting five being De'Aaron Fox, Keon, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis. In their write-up, which I'll try and keep short, Kevin Huerter has started 134 of his 139 games as a member of the Kings, yet the trade for DeMar DeRozan should have head coach Mike Brown considering a role change for the 25-year-old wing. He's 26 now, right? 26 today. Happy birthday, Kev.
Happy birthday,
Kev. To the bench. Sorry. Hope you're having a good one. Huerter's primary strengths lie in his volume three-point shooting. He shot 38% last year. Huerter is going to have the ball come his way far less often with DeRozan in the starting unit. However, especially with Sacramento needing to grow Keegan Murray's I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Read the commas wrong there. Huerter is going to have to have the ball come his way far less often with DeRozan in the starting unit. However, especially with Sacramento needing to grow Keegan Murray's offensive role as well. With Keon Ellis swapped in for Huerter, the Kings could have an extremely strong second unit led by Monk, Huerter, Devin Carter when he recovers from his shoulder surgery, Jalen McDaniels, Trey Lyles, and others. I would love to know who others are. It goes on to talk about Keon Ellis's numbers and says over 94% of Ellis's three-point shots came off of an assist, as he's perfectly content as a floor spacer who doesn't need to eat up offensive possessions. With DeRozan on the board, adjustments will need to be made. Swapping Huerter for Ellis gives the Kings better balance in the rotation overall. Alan Stiles, a topic we have talked about, not to exhaustion, but we have definitely discussed it quite a bit this summer, I would say.
Yeah, and my thought process is pretty similar to what it has been. I have gone back and forth on this a bit more than I thought. And I think that in situations like this, there are different answers to maybe the same question, right? I think there's what you would do, Chris Watkins, and then there is what you think the team will do. So for me, I am not convinced that the team will, just based on, my first year covering the team, and I do understand that Chris Duarte got in there once or twice or a couple times for Kevin Huerter, but just based on how last season went and how they actually weren't even, they never even got rolling, really. And it was really hard for Kevin Huerter to lose that starting spot. I just think because of that and because of how the season ended, where yes, Keon Ellis played well, but they lose in the they lose in the play-in, they get past the Warriors, and Keon balled in that game. Don't get me wrong. I just think that based on what I've gathered from this team and how this team operates, especially with the injury that was involved as well, I think that Kevin Huerter is going to get the benefit of the doubt. I don't know for how long, but that's just what I think, man.
Yeah, I personally would start Keon, but to your point, like what the Kings will actually do, I really don't know. I mean, because everything you just said makes the most sense to me, where the Kings are kind of in a position where they can walking into training camp. Like, who knows what happens game one, but walking into the first day of training camp, I would think it's going to be a pretty awkward situation because, like you said, Keon started at the end of the year, but Kevin pretty much for the most part started when he was healthy. And so both guys are probably walking in day one of camp thinking, unless they've been expressly told, like, I kind of think I have the starter spot.
Right.
And I feel like Kevin does have a really good hold to it. It's mine until I officially lose it. And you can definitely argue he did lose it at the end of last year, but I think you have to give him a fair shake. And I think Mike Brown definitely will. I would assume it's going to be as open of a competition as possible with the exception of really Malik Monk. I mean, you and I still kind of believe that Malik is just going to come off the bench no matter how well he plays during training camp, how much better he looks than everybody else. That's more of just a role in a substitution kind of pattern thing. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see Kevin Huerter starting, as much as it feels obvious that Keon had this breakout year and he is the defensive guy. Again, that's the direction I would go, but I could definitely see the Kings saying, like, we know Keon's going to be fine relatively. Even if he comes off the bench, we pretty much know what he's going to bring, and we can put him in at any time. If you bring Kevin Huerter off the bench, it's just not a role he's been comfortable or has had to have much in the past. So he would kind of have to have an adjustment. We don't really know if Kevin Huerter would get the same shot volume that he's used to, which, again, sounds like a Kevin Huerter problem and not a Kings problem. But yeah, I definitely think there is a really good argument for Kevin Huerter staying in the starting unit. And I'd probably say it's about as close to 50-50 as you can get if I had to guess right now.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, what I just talked about is what I think the Kings will do. Yeah. What I would do is I would say that leash that we talk about, that was all last season. Mm-hmm. And I'm putting myself back into the position where we had conversations about Kevin Huerter possibly getting moved out of the starting lineup before the injury.
Yes,
so I'm trying to, or if I'm the Kings, I'm remembering that part of it. Kevin Huerter, it's really tough because you can say, well, you can't lose your starting spot, which you can, by the way.
Yes, you definitely
can. But you can't lose your starting spot due to injury. But I think it was a situation where he was holding on for dear life already.
Yes. Yeah.
And if I'm the Kings, and Chris, we'll probably get, when training camp starts, there has to be a first, starters, and
I'm sure we'll get
some
images,
and you can't hide that.
Pictures of like, hey, Keon Ellis is wearing the same colored jersey as De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, and Sabonis.
And I can hear Mike Brown's answers right now. His political answers.
We're working on it.
It's a rotation, but it's not, because you don't have enough time. You got to implement a new player in DeMar DeRozan. Yeah. You don't have time to mess around. Whatever it looks like on that first week, I think it is going to tell us a lot about their thought process. Coming up next, we continue the conversation, and we have a conversation about Keegan Murray. Where does he rank among the NBA's best power forward? Power forward! That's some hoops hype. We'll get into it. And the Tom Segura tickets coming up. Nate will pick that number. Switch over now if you're on the app. Stiles Watkins, Sactown Sports.
The only place